April 26, 1986. In a control room in northern Ukraine, Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov orders a safety test to proceed. The reactor is unstable, but the order is given. In the next few hours, that single command will a force equal to 500 Hiroshima bombs. A force that would permanently reshape a nation, and redefine humanity's relationship with its own technology. This was not an act of nature, it was a choice. Disaster is rarely a single, simple event. It is a chain, a link of human decisions, institutional failures, and ignored warnings. Each one alone might seem small, together they build a trap. This series is about the final, decisive link in that chain. The moment a person, a system, or a society crossed a line from which there was no return. From the freezing North Atlantic to the sweltering factories of New York. From the skies over France to the depths of the Gulf of Mexico. We will trace 10 of these fatal pivots. We will stand in the shoes of the engineer, the captain, the foreman. The manager, the individual who, for one critical instant, held the course of history in their hands. We will examine the pressure, the assumption, the overlooked detail that turned a controlled environment into a killing ground. This is a study of the deadliest man-made disasters in history. It begins with a test that should never have started. The control room of Reactor 4 was quiet, save for the hum of machinery. Anatoly Dyatlov, the deputy chief engineer, had ordered the test to proceed. It was a simulation of a safety feature, one designed to prove the reactor's stability during a power outage. The procedure required lowering the reactor's power output to a safe low level. But as operators pulled the control rods, the power instead plunged too far, nearly stalling the core. Against established safety protocols, Dyatlov commanded his team to raise the power again. To do this, they withdrew almost all of the reactor's control rods, the very devices designed to slow the nuclear reaction. The reactor was now operating in a forbidden zone. Its automatic safety systems deliberately disabled by the crew under orders. The graphite-tipped rods, once removed, left a design flaw exposed. A momentary surge of power upon reinsertion. In the final moments, the shift foreman, Alexander Akimov, pressed the emergency shutdown button. The rods began their slow descent back into the core. But their graphite tips displaced coolant first, creating an immediate and catastrophic spike in reactivity. At 1:23:40 a.m., the reactor's output soared to 100 times its normal capacity. The building shook. Akimov reported a power surge he could not stop. Then, two massive explosions tore the 1,000-ton biological shield from its mountings, spewing burning graphite and radioactive fuel into the open night. The silence in the control room was not a sign of safety. It was a failure. Hours earlier, in the heart of the Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, water had breached a storage tank holding 42 tons of methyl isocyanate. A chemical reaction began, building pressure and heat. But on the night of December 2, 1984, the warning systems meant to detect such a leak were switched off for maintenance. No siren pierced the air. Instead, a plant worker named Mohammed Ashraf first noticed his eyes stinging. Then a bitter taste filled his mouth. Looking toward the tank, he saw a white mist creeping along the ground. It was not smoke. It was a gas, heavier than air, seeping from the factory's boundaries and rolling into the sleeping city. Workers scrambled, but the safety measures failed one by one. A vent gas scrubber designed to neutralize the toxin was offline. A flare tower meant to burn any escaping gas had no pilot light. The poison met no resistance. Outside the factory walls, the mist settled into the narrow lanes of the surrounding shantytowns. It pooled in low-lying areas where families slept on cots and floors. The gas was an intruder in the night, odorless in its deadly concentration, entering homes through cracks and windows. People awoke coughing, their lungs burning, their vision blurred. They stumbled into the streets, not knowing what pursued them or which way to run. The city had become a trap, and the only alarm was the sound of its own people choking. The previous disasters stemmed from invisible failures in policy or pressure. This one was built into the very bones of a famous machine. A machine declared unsinkable. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, knew the truth. He stood on the bridge of the RMS Titanic just after midnight on April 15, 1912. Captain Smith held a simple question: how long did they have? Andrews had designed her. He knew her 16 watertight compartments could only be breached so far. The iceberg had done its work silently, opening a 300-foot gash along her starboard side. Cold North Atlantic water was pouring in. Andrews did the math in his head. A calculation of volume of physics of pride. The compartments were not sealed at the top. As one filled, it would spill over into the next. The design could handle a 2-compartment flood. Perhaps 3, but not 5, not 6. The ship would sink by the bow, pulling herself under. Andrews delivered the verdict to the captain, a verdict on his own life's work. 1 to 2 hours, no more. He then left the bridge, not to save himself. He walked the plunging hallways, urging passengers into lifeboats they did not believe they needed. He knew each detail of the grand staircase, the oak paneling, the electric lights. He watched his perfect creation die around him. The flaw was not in the steel, but in the belief that sealed tops were unnecessary. That nature could be compartmentalized. The water, finding its own level, proved otherwise. It began with a simple, terrible miscommunication. The morning of December 6, 1917, found Halifax, Nova Scotia, choked with wartime traffic. The narrows of the harbor were a bottleneck of steel and steam. The Belgian relief ship IMO was running late, eager to reach the open sea. The French munitions carrier Mont Blanc was arriving, its holds packed with a volatile cocktail: TNT, picric acid, benzol, and guncon. Under maritime rules, ships in the narrow channel should pass port to port, left side to left side. But as the IMO pressed forward, the Mont Blanc signaled its intent. A series of confused whistle blasts echoed across the water. Each captain interpreted the other's signals differently. The IMO went hard to port. The Mont Blanc went hard to starboard. For a moment, it seemed they might slip past each other. Then, with a grinding shriek of metal, they did not. The collision itself was not catastrophic, but a spark from the grinding steel met the benzol pooling on the Mont Blanc's deck. A fire erupted instantly, climbing toward the cargo holds. The Mont Blanc's crew, knowing what was coming, abandoned ship. They rowed frantically for the Dartmouth shore, shouting warnings that could not be heard over the wind. For 20 minutes, the burning vessel drifted toward a pier in Richmond, a working-class neighborhood of Halifax. Crowds gathered along the waterfront, watching the spectacle. Fire engines rushed to the docks. Then at 9:04:35 a.m. the Mont Blanc vanished. In 1/10,000th of a second, the ship and its cargo converted into a white-hot sun at water level. The resulting shockwave ripped through the city at thousands of feet per second. It shattered windows 50 miles away. A tsunami of harbor water followed, washing over the ruins. The navigational error was measured in feet. The consequence was measured in square miles of utter devastation. The Halifax explosion still hung in the air, a monument to a single misread signal. But ambition was not confined to the sea. It had taken to the skies in a new and colossal form. The rigid airship, Britain had staked its pride on 2 of these leviathans, R-100 and R-101. They were more than aircraft. They were floating statements of empire, designed to connect London to India without ever touching the sea. R-101 was the government's favorite, a symbol of national prestige. Its interior was a luxury liner of the air, with promenade decks, a dining salon, and cabins for 50. But its vast canvas skin hid a fatal secret. The ambition was grand, but the engineering was rushed. To meet a political deadline for a maiden voyage to India, officials demanded more lift. The solution was drastic. In its final weeks, the ship was sliced open amidships. Workers inserted an entirely new gas bag section, making the vessel longer and heavier. No comprehensive flight tests followed this major surgery. The new covering fabric, heavier than the original, was never properly waterproofed. On its first true test flight, which was also its maiden voyage to India, the R-101 lifted into a damp English evening on October 4, 1930. It carried the Secretary of State for Air and a crew of eager pioneers. Over northern France, a squall swept in. The rain soaked the untested envelope. The added weight, the waterlogged fabric, the untried engines, all conspired against the giant. It began to lose altitude. The captain ordered a sharp turn, perhaps seeking calmer air. The strain was too much. At 2:09 a.m., the R-101's nose dipped toward a low hill near Beauvais. It did not explode. It simply crumpled, its hydrogen cells igniting on impact. The fire was swift and terrible. Of the 54 people aboard, only 6 survived the crash and they would later succumb. The dream of a British airship empire died with them on that hillside, a victory of political ambition over sober caution. The airship R101 had vanished into the North Sea. Its story was one of ambition in the sky. Now the scene shifts from the clouds to a crowded city block. From the grand to the grinding, in Manhattan the Ash Building stood 10 stories tall. Its upper floors housed the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Here hundreds of workers, mostly young immigrant women, bent over sewing machines. The air was thick with cloth dust, the floors were littered with scraps of fabric. It was a Saturday afternoon, March 25, 1911. The work week was nearly done. A foreman kept a routine watch. His duties included security and order. Part of that order, a common practice in many factories then, involved a locked door. One exit on the Washington Place side was kept bolted. Managers cited the prevention of theft and unauthorized breaks. The fabric bins were full, the long tables were crowded. Beneath them, a bin held the week's discarded linen and paper trimmings. Then a spark, its origin was never certain, a discarded match, an electrical fault in a machine. It found the dry cuttings in that bin. Flames leapt up, feeding on the lightweight material everywhere. They climbed the curtains, they raced across the lint-covered floors. Workers rushed from their stations. They turned toward the familiar stairs, the elevator, the Washington Place door. The handle would not turn, the door was locked. The ambition of the R101 was built on steel and gas. The ambition in China was built on concrete and earth. In the Huai River Basin, a vast network of dams rose in the 1950s, a monumental effort to control floods and generate power. Bangkeo Dam was the linchpin, a massive earthen structure hailed as an iron dam permanently securing the plains. Its chief designer, Chen Xing, advocated for a system of 12 floodgates. Officials, citing cost, reduced that number to 5. Chen Xing warned this was a critical vulnerability. He was removed from the project. For years, the system held. Then, in August 1975, Typhoon Nina stalled over central China. It dumped more than a year's average rainfall in a single day. The reservoir behind Bangkeo began to swell. The 5 floodgates could not discharge the water fast enough. Engineers watched the water creep up the dam's face, past warning markers into the night. At 1:00 a.m. on August 8, with the pressure unbearable, the dam failed. A wall of water 20 feet high in places and moving at 30 miles per hour exploded into the valley below. It wiped entire towns from the map in minutes. The sequential collapse of dozens of smaller downstream dams followed, multiplying the devastation. The official silence that followed was as deep as the floodwaters. For days, the outside world knew nothing. The final toll was a staggering secret for years, hidden within the statistics of a natural typhoon. But this was not merely nature's fury. It was the fury of a river meeting a man-made wall that was never meant to hold it back. The pressure to finish was immense. Every day the Deepwater Horizon rig remained on station cost BP nearly $1 million. Managers pushed to complete the Macondo well and move on. The final step was a critical safety check, a cement seal at the bottom of the well over a mile beneath the sea. Halliburton, the contractor, warned the cement mix might be unstable. BP officials chose to ignore the data. They accepted the test. Back on the rig, the crew began a negative pressure test. It was meant to prove the well was sealed. The results were confusing. For hours, pressure readings on 2 different gauges did not match. One showed a dangerous buildup of pressure from deep underground. The other appeared normal. The senior company man on board, Don Vidrine, was consulted. Faced with contradictory data and the crushing cost of delay, he made a call. He interpreted the anomalous readings as a minor issue, a bladder effect. He declared the test a success. The decision was logged. The well was declared secure. For a moment, the relentless schedule seemed back on track. Then, deep below the rig, the flawed cement began to crack. A torrent of gas and oil under immense pressure found its path. It shot up the drill pipe, a geyser of highly flammable methane rocketing toward the surface. It reached the rig floor just after 9:30 p.m. The first explosion was sudden and violent and lit the night sky over the Gulf of Mexico. The horizon was already doomed. The concrete and steel sarcophagus built over Chernobyl's reactor core looms against the sky, a silent angular tomb. At Bhopal, the chemical plant's rusted skeleton is slowly swallowed by vines and scrubland. In the North Atlantic, the Titanic's grand staircase exists only as a debris field scattered across a silent, muddy plain. These places are empty now. The sirens have faded. The urgent voices on the radios have gone quiet. But the silence is the point. It is not the silence of something forgotten. It is the heavy silence of a question that was asked and answered in the worst possible way. Each ruin is a fossilized moment, a permanent record of a calculation that failed, a warning ignored, a risk accepted. They are not monuments to the disasters themselves, but to the ordinary hours that preceded them. To the routine shift change, the standard procedure, the signed-off report. The distance between that normalcy and the catastrophe is measured only in minutes. A single weathered shoe rests in the dust near the triangle FACTORYS Chinese letter. A child's bicycle lies half buried near the Bangkeo Dam. In these objects, the vast scale collapses into a human dimension. They are the final, unplanned artifacts. They were dropped in flight, left behind in the sudden, terrible transition from a living world to a dead one. They mark the exact instant where life was happening and then it was not. The ruins remain not as lessons, for lessons can be unlearned. They remain as evidence.